Welcome to Donna's World. Hello everyone, welcome to Donna's World. Thank God it's Friday. Today, I'm going to respond to a request from one of my regular viewers, Patricia Wask, who says that she would love to know more about how Nigerians organize their families and, the family life, whether it's the nuclear family or the extended family. And I'd also like to give a little shout out to a Nigerian viewer called Adama Ogu, who says she's been a fan of my work for many years, way back to when I was a young newspaper columnist. And she has also, like me, lived abroad. And so the reason I'm calling her out is to say, well, thanks for your very kind comments, but also I would like Nigerian viewers to comment on some of the comments I make about our society. So if I miss anything out or you have some thought about what I've said, let's hear it so that we can feature it in future broadcasts, okay? So, Nigerian families. What triggered off this response, this request from Patricia, was the fact that Polly Alakija, an English lady that I interviewed on this channel a couple of weeks ago, said that she did observe when she married a Nigerian man that there was more interference from the extended family in this country than there would be in the UK. And I think she's very right. That has certainly been my experience. In Nigeria, the nuclear family, that is parents and children, are not regarded as some kind of holy grail or sacred entity that cannot be invaded by outsiders, being members of the family who are not part of this tight nuclear unit. The extended family matters here. In Nigeria, you marry into a tribe. You marry into a class. You marry into something that is far bigger than just you and the person you've married and the children you have. So, and there's tremendous respect for that, set up here. I mean, to some extent, this happens in other countries as well. I mean, if you marry into the British royal family like Meghan did when she married Prince Harry, you are marrying into a class, you're marrying into a kind of tribe, you are marrying into something that's much bigger than you and the person you've chosen to spend your life with. So it's not a completely unique thing. And in fact, I would put it to Meghan's supporters and detractors that one of her biggest problems was she did not understand that she wasn't just marrying one person, okay? She was marrying an institution. Now, in Africa and in Nigeria specifically, the family is an institution, it's an almighty institution. And most people respect the extended family in our culture. And it creates a lot of problems, but it also provides some safety nets. Okay, I'll give you an example of the cultural difference. I married an Englishman when we were both young, and he came from, it was a sort of large Catholic family. And so, I got to know all his siblings very early on, and of course met his parents before we got married, and everyone got along swimmingly. I didn't experience racism in that family. I mean, if there was any racism, I did not see it. So the problem I later had with my husband that led to us getting divorced was not race related. Anyway, one thing that really, really shocked me because of my upbringing was that when I had a baby, Oliver, who's now nearly 30, My mother-in-law wanted to come and spend some time with her new grandchild. And she asked me for permission. So that in itself was a shock to me. It's like, hey, listen, you don't need my permission. He's your son. You know, you are very entitled to come and stay with us for as long as you want, quite frankly. And then when she did come, Mary, my mother-in-law, she was a lovely woman. She was from Yorkshire originally. Very, very nice woman. When she did come, she was very sort of sensitive and diplomatic. She moved around the house very, very slowly. And she would say things to me like, would you mind awfully if I got some milk from the fridge? I'd like to make some tea. Would you mind if I had some of the chicken in the oven? And again, I'd be shocked. It's like, Mama, of course you can. It's your son's house. I mean, it's my house too, but you are my mother-in-law and you are entitled to have anything you want in this house. And thank you for coming, because she was also very helpful with the baby. Because, I mean, I didn't know anything about child rearing, you know? So it was fine. Now, what I find is that she did that with the expectation that I might be offended if she moved in and behaved as if her son's home was her home and as if she could have whatever she wanted. And having spoken to my many English girlfriends, you know, their attitude was that, well, of course she should ask you if she wanted anything from the fridge. Not all of them, but most of them kind of like, don't share my feeling that the mother-in-law has every right to be there. Not just that the mother-in-law has every right to be there, but that the mother-in-law has every right to be there for an extended period of time if she so wishes. So as it happened, my mother-in-law wanted to get back after a fairly short period of time to her own husband, Brian, my father-in-law, whom I also loved. And so she left to go back to her own home and her own marriage. But you know, if she'd been a widow, for example, and she'd wanted to stay for a year, I probably wouldn't have thought there was anything wrong with that, you know? Not least because she was very helpful. But anyway, even if she hadn't been helpful, and my husband had said, sorry, my mom wants to be here till the baby is 1 year old, I probably wouldn't have crumbled much because of the way I was brought up. I probably wouldn't have grumbled at all. Anyway, in Nigeria, it's completely the opposite. Here, we even have a special word for mothers-in-law swooping in when their daughters have children and doing what is known as omugu, O-M-U-G-U. And that's where they go and they, you know, help their daughters take care of the new baby. And depending on their personality type, because I've actually heard some stories about, horror stories about mothers who are very, how shall I put it, very la-di-da, who expect to be looked after. And so the daughter winds up looking after the baby and her mother, rather than getting help from the mother who has moved in for several weeks or months. It's such a big issue here, but it's just what we expect. Meanwhile, the husband's mother also swoops in at will, and we have some quite funny comedy skits here about what happens when two mothers-in-law wind up under the same roof battling it out over this new baby. But that's, you know, a story for another day, but it's real. Here, mothers-in-law feel absolutely no compunction about tormenting their daughters-in-law. Some of them are helpful, some of them are not, but it's just something you accept. It's that your home is not just for you. You know, you also have to accept your in-laws. And then it's not just the mothers-in-law. Fathers-in-law can also be quite intrusive. I mean, frankly, they're not very interested in gaining possession of a new baby and interfering in how it's, you know, being fed and weaned and blah, blah, blah. But they, you know, they interfere in other ways. I mean, I have heard stories about fathers-in-law taking possession of certain financial issues and being domineering around things like how the couple spend money and what obligations the couple displays towards the ancestral home. Because in Nigeria, we all come from villages. No matter how sophisticated you are, or urbanized or westernized, everybody here comes from a village. I'm sure it was like that in Europe at some point, but it's not like that anymore now. But here we come specifically from a very specific village. And so fathers-in-law are often quite, bullying around what they expect you to do to fulfill your village commitments. Because, once you marry a man, you still come from your village, but you also come from his village, and his father, his parents are the people who control how you relate to that space. Most people have a second home in their villages, and some Nigerian men, particularly of course of the older generation, are very wedded to their villages. Even if they're some sort of sophisticated United Nations official or ex-ambassador to London or whatever, they're still wedded to their villages, their ancestral villages. And most people of my generation struggle with that, but are still expected not only to bury their parents in those villages, but to continue to engage with those villages. I'll talk about burials in a minute. Now, another thing about the extended family in Nigeria is that, again, no matter how sophisticated your branch of the family is, almost everybody has poor relatives. Relatives who may not own a pair of shoes, relatives who may own shoes but struggle with things like school fees and health bills. And you are expected, as a member of the more affluent branch of that family, to help the relatives who don't have enough money. Even if you're not particularly well off yourself, you're still expected to send money to impoverished relatives for things like medical bills, school fees, because education here is not free. So you're expected to help your poorer relatives get their children through school. And it's really stressful. Even for people who are fairly well off, it's still a stress because it means that your savings are not your own. Your money is not your own entirely. Or at least, even if you refuse to help anybody, you're made to feel very guilty about it. I'll give you an example. I went to see my son in Los Angeles this summer, having not seen him for about 18 months. And I didn't have much money. I literally scraped together a few spare dollars I had stashed in my bank account. And at the same time, a lot of my relatives were contacting me to say that they were hungry, or they couldn't afford school fees for their children, or they couldn't afford medical bills for their elderly parents. And because the Nigerian economy has basically collapsed in the past year or so. So, there's always been a poverty problem in Nigeria, but now it's just off the scale, okay? So I had a choice between spending the money I would have spent on going to visit my son in Los Angeles on people right here in Nigeria who needed urgent assistance. Well, I'm kind of sorry to say that I chose to go and see my son. And I do feel bad about it. I've got really mixed feelings about the whole thing because I got to tell you, my father spent so much of his spare cash. And not just spare cash. He spent money that he could have spent on his nuclear family, on us, his children and his wife. He spent a lot of it on relatives who were in need. And I can honestly say that he must have educated, several. I can't tell you the number, but not just several. He educated a lot of relatives by paying their school fees and stuff like that. And so I kind of feel that my father did his bit for the extended family and that we don't have to do as much. And there's a part of me that thinks, well, because oftentimes it's the children of the people my father helped or my grandfather helped who still need help today. So you think, well, is this going to go on forever? Will my son have to help their children? So, these are not very Christian or kind-hearted feelings. But that's the way the cookie crumbles. And you do, in my case, get to the point where you think, to hell with it. I cannot be that unselfish. My father was very unselfish. Honestly, I can count on one or two hands the number of decent holidays my parents had. Because they were well off, but they spent so much of their disposable income on helping other members of their respective families that they wound up enjoying very, very few luxuries themselves. I mean, I've got these treasured photographs of myself on holiday with my parents in Paris when I was a teenager. And I can hardly remember any other holidays because they were so busy always looking after other people. So the extended family can be a source of intense irritation and resentment. But for those who benefit from this safety net provided by the richer relatives, it's a wonderful thing, And I must say that even if some of the poorer relatives are not able to reciprocate financially and are always asking for favors, and come from a branch of the family that was asking my grandfather for favors and are asking me for favors now. Some of them are very nice people, and there is this feeling of love and affection from them. So it's not always about the money. Sometimes it's just about, helping nice people stand on their own 2 feet, even if they can't stand for very long without help. Because one thing I've learned about life is there are different some people are strong and some people are weak, and that's the end of it. And I suppose here in Nigeria, we have this belief that we should continue to support the weaker members of our families. Okay, so another thing about the extended family is that a lot of families will bring some of their less advantaged relatives to live with them from the village or even from the poorer parts of the city to come and stay with them. They sometimes grow up like sort of semi-siblings to the children of the nuclear family, or sometimes they are more like domestic staff, which I always found rather uncomfortable. My father had several chauffeurs or drivers who were actually relatives of his, and a couple of nannies to we children as well, who were related to us. But I suppose that's one way of helping, is giving people jobs. And if the only jobs they're qualified for at that point in time is domestic work, why not? Well, I'm sure some of you will have opinions about this, whether it's right or wrong. And again, the extended family. It has a big say when you're getting married. Even the least educated relative will probably play some kind of part in the wedding. Because we do 2 types of wedding in Nigeria. We have the traditional wedding, which is the type of weddings we had before Europeans colonized us, the British to be specific. And then we have church weddings, which are Christian ceremonies. And so, the relatives usually play a part in both, but especially in the traditional wedding, which involves the whole clan, So every Kubara on the planet is invited to or feels entitled to be at anything big that I'm doing, whether I'm getting married or whether, as happened to me, I'm burying my parents. They play a particularly strong role around burial because the whole concept, because most people get buried in their ancestral villages, and the whole point is that you're returning them to the community they came from. And so the community they came from receives them and also informs you of some of the rites that need to be performed. I mean, I'm sure in some cases these rites are non-Christian, but generally it's just fairly harmless things like, how much drinks you have to give the chiefs in the village or the oldest member of your family. Here, the head of the family isn't always the richest, most famous person. The head of the family could be the least literate person. If they're the oldest, they're the oldest. If they're the chief, they're the chief. And in that context, education and wealth doesn't matter at all, you know? Now, in my village, my extended family includes the king of our village, who is the paramount ruler, as we call him, who is actually a cousin of mine. And, you know, kind of, if you think I've got problems, if I think I've got problems battling to help people with my limited financial resources, it's even worse for people like him who live amongst the people in the village and are expected to do so much to support and assist those who need support and assistance. Okay, so I think that the extended family is with us or will be with us for some time. But I think it will die out, maybe within one more generation, because you have people like me who were educated abroad and just don't feel that same pull towards the ancestral village. And I've got quite a few friends who have refused to bury their parents in ancestral villages because, you know, let's say they work in Lagos, which is the commercial capital of Nigeria, and they're expected, if they come from somewhere on the other side of the country, they're expected to take their parents home and bury them in the village. And some of my friends have said no. I'm going to bury my mother or my father somewhere near where I actually live so that I can visit the grave on a regular basis, because I ain't going to no village on a regular basis anytime soon. So there's quite a lot of rebellion around that issue in certain circles from people who either studied or grew up abroad or went to boarding schools, you know, or universities in America or wherever. But also, even people who didn't study abroad, a lot of them are beginning to question the whole village thing. Because like I said, you work in Lagos, you work in Abuja, you work in a big city, you know, you bury your parents somewhere where you hardly ever go. It's not ideal. But then it depends on how you see these things, because some people say, well, it's ideal. Even if you're not going to visit the grave very often, you're taking them back. It's almost like an ashes to ashes, dust to dust thing. You're taking them back to where they came from originally. And you're burying them with their ancestors. Because, you know, you're enabling their souls to join with the souls of those who went before them. Depends on how you view these things, but that is how many people see it. But like I said, I don't think this will go on forever. My son is absolutely not interested in my village at all. He's half English anyway, and his father is the English one, so he probably feels more English than Nigerian. But, you know, and I can tell you now, I have no interest in being buried in a village, in my village. I want to be buried in the UK for reasons that are complicated. One of which is the fact that I want my son to be able to visit my grave easily. Anyway, as you can see, in Nigeria, extended family issues dominate your life from birth to grave. And it's something that will probably die out eventually, but for now it's a very real part of our lives, and I do the little I can. I also pay, as my father did, I help people out with school fees, relatives, school fees and medical costs and stuff like that. And not just people who are related to me, by the way. Just generally, everybody, it's just so many people here who are having problems. You know, I help lots of people in little ways because I'm not rich, but I do what I can. But like I said, you do feel guilty if you ever take a break and do something for yourself instead and just think, you know what, everybody else's needs can just go on hold for now. I'm sorry, I need to buy some cheesecake, or I need to go on holiday, or I need to buy a new dress. So I'd love to know what you think about this need to balance Christian charity or Muslim charity with your own personal needs as a human being, or as a mother, or to your own needs to your nuclear family. I mean, I know that my siblings and I feel that my father really overdid it. he spent way too much of his spare money on other people rather than on us. My mother definitely felt that way. We were being selfish, you know? I mean, I think was it Jesus Christ said that it was easier for a camel to pass through the eye of a needle than for a rich man to enter the kingdom of heaven. People who make the ultimate sacrifice of spending every single spare penny they have on other people are obviously more likely to go to heaven if you believe in all that religious stuff. But, you know, for now, let me just say that one of the things that will make the extended family obligations less arduous is if countries like Nigeria ever get governments that take social welfare seriously. And actually, you know, it's actually the government that should be prepared, you know, should be providing for all these people who are suffering and who lack money for all sorts of things. But we haven't gotten there yet. Here, charity is personal, philanthropy is personal. And I really pity the people in the villages or the extended family who have to depend on the goodwill of individuals like myself. Because if we're in a bad mood, we can give the money quite, you know, sort of like reluctantly and ungraciously. Whereas if you're just picking up a check from a government office, it's not personal. You don't feel like dirt because you need help with X or Y. What I'm saying is that sometimes we give in a friendly, happy way. Sometimes if we're not in a good mood, it's obvious that we would rather not be giving this help. So, you know, I challenge African governments, especially the Nigerian government, to get off their backside and take responsibility for the have-nots in their respective societies. Thank you very much for listening. Okie dokie. Let's have some viewers' voices. You know, we've picked out a handful of responses to last Friday's video, which was mostly about Meghan and Harry, the Duke and Duchess of Sussex. We also talked about my friend Polly, who's an artist. Nobody has anything bad to say about her, but I'm afraid Harry and Meghan, well, there are a lot of negative comments, which I feel I should share with you because they are so sanctimonious. It's like, you know, they are saints, they are perfect. Nobody else has ever, you know, they've never wronged anyone, they have only been wronged. And, you know, the public isn't buying it. They have their fans, there are people who believe them, but a lot of people, myself included, do not believe that they are as wonderful as they think they are. So, comments. Okay, this one is actually from a friend of mine called Owen. Her YouTube tag is Living Healthy with Owen 926. She's an influencer. She also has a channel about health and diet. She has a different approach from mine because I am into fasting. Extended fasting, that's what I aim to do, is to have as many days as possible in an average week when I don't eat, okay? Because I find it's a very cleansing process for me, but it doesn't work for everyone. So if you want to hear alternative viewpoints, try Owen's channel on Instagram. Okay, so Owen says, Harry found love and is happy. Time will tell. Donu, I suspect that you will have a nice meal paid for, because I said that on last week that if I turned out to be wrong about Harry and Meghan, my cousin, who is one of their fans, I would buy her a wonderful meal in a great restaurant, and if I turned out to be right, she would have to buy me a meal. So Owen is saying she thinks I'm going to wind up getting the meal. Anyway, she says, you really have to wonder about anyone who gets married and only invites one person from their past, which was her mom. Very odd. Harry should have been concerned about that. A good spouse tries to bridge the gap between siblings, not encourage them to air discrepancies. Okay. Owen goes on to say that she lost the little respect she had for Oprah Winfrey after that interview, and I think I did too. I just felt this as an older black woman who's old enough to be Meghan's mom. She should have advised Meghan not to give that interview at a time when Harry's grandfather, the Duke of Edinburgh, Prince Philip, was dying in hospital. And I think sometimes, instead of airing your grievances, you go for the conciliatory approach. And I don't believe that every member of Harry's family was evil and racist. And I just think the whole thing could have been handled better. And I wish Oprah had advised her to handle it differently. So Owen says, let's also not forget that Meghan is not an A-class actress. She has had way more attention since Harry. Many people didn't know of her before, and I hope I am wrong about my concern and belief that they are likely to last long together. Well, so do I. Because I think Harry would be devastated if the whole thing comes crashing down around his ears once this actress woman has dealt with him and taken his children and ruined his relationship with his family. So, you know what? When you mess someone's life up that bad, you better stay with them to keep them afloat. Let's hope she does. Then there's Julie Ann Jules. And she's of the opinion that Harry's mother, Diana, was no saint. And she gives many examples of Diana's infidelities and her own, immaturity and misbehavior. I think this is in response to me saying that, I'm not very happy about the way Harry's father, Charles, and Queen Camilla, behaved towards Harry's mother. You'll probably notice that I don't like Harry and Meghan. I particularly dislike Meghan because I think she's the stronger of the two. You probably notice I'm very lukewarm about Catherine, the Princess of Wales. I am quite skeptical about her, but I don't think she's as poisonous as the other one. And Camilla, I have things around her adultery, but life is complicated. And as Julie Ann points out, Diana wasn't blameless, and Charles perhaps needed to find somebody else. I don't know. And then there's Deep Thought 42. From reports I've seen from reputable journalists, a lot of what Meghan has accused Catherine of is Meghan deflecting, twisting, cherry-picking the facts to turn around the narrative, to accuse Catherine of doing what she, in fact, did herself to Catherine. That's very possible, Very, very possible that Catherine, I should be more enthusiastic about Catherine, but so far I'm not. I kind of half believe Meghan when she says Catherine didn't really want her around. Because let's face it, Meghan is more naturally glamorous and, vibrant than Catherine. And she actually had achieved something in her life before she met Harry, whereas Catherine had achieved zero except working for her parents and hanging around waiting for William. But don't get me started on Catherine. I know many of you are Catherine fans. So I expect I'm going to get lots of complaints, but that's just how I feel about her. I might change my opinion. Hell, I might even change my opinion about Meghan. I'm open-minded. If something new comes up that proves I was wrong all along, I will admit it. And then V. Ogulu, I think is my cousin. This is another cousin of mine, and she says, I think people should focus on their own lives and leave Harry and Meghan alone. The obsession with all they do and don't do are beyond normal. And I think, yes, Vera. See, nobody would focus on them with this sort of blowtorch level of attention if they didn't constantly advertise their grievances and, draw attention to themselves and show off and accuse everybody of everything, So, look, there are other members of the royal family who may even be worse people for all we know, but because they're not publicity seekers, most people ignore them. Okay? So, I agree. People should leave them alone if they will leave us alone, but they're constantly bombarding us with their issues. And then there's Relsba, who thinks that most Americans view the antics of the pair as a TV comedy show, but at least it's sort of entertainment that draws attention away from what she describes as the ridiculous American election season. Wendy Johnson says if they hate the royal family, they should stop using royal titles and leave the royal family alone. And Carlo7203 says that Meghan and Harry's PR teams pay people for support, so take some of these comments they make against other people with a grain of salt. Carlo has met Meghan, he says, or she says, about 5 times, and every experience was unpleasant. And he says she's very discourteous, very bratish. Well, I don't know if Carlo is a man or a woman, but Carlo does not like Meghan, okay? And is entitled to express that opinion in public because Meghan is a public figure, okay? So that's it for today. Thank you, all the viewers who've lent their voices to my channel. I really appreciate your inputs. See you next week. And don't forget to tune in to Wellness Wednesday next Wednesday, which is all about weight loss, self-improvement, blah, blah, blah. Bye.